Everyone, welcome to our new episode of the Outlier Podcast. I put Eric with me today. Hi, Eric. How are you doing, sir?
And I'm doing good. Pleasure to be here.
My pleasure. So, who is Eric? Eric is Vice President of Technology at Provident Credit Union based in Bay Area. Long, illustrious career of two plus decades in technology. Right now, leading technology for one of the large credit unions in Bay Area. So, Eric, if you want to add something, add bells and whistles to introduction, sir, please feel free.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, so I started my career in banking. It's been about 25 years ago. Started as a night operator, held various technical positions, moved around companies, and then I transitioned into leadership about 10 years ago, and that's where I've been since.
Sounds good, Eric. That's amazing. Let's talk about your journey a bit. Like, do you want to talk about your career journey, Eric?
Yeah. So as I mentioned, I started off as a night operator while I was going through college, and just didn't really know anything about banking. I just kind of learned the ropes through that. After I got my degree in computer science, I became a software developer. Still stayed in the banking arena, and that was pretty much it. Then transitioned into manager, VP. So just that's kind of the way it went.
Yeah, interesting. Let's talk about a bit more about your current role and what you do at Provident. So, how do you define an excellent digital experience for members today, right? That's the first question. And how is that definition changing over here? Because definitely the definition of digital was very different 5 years back, 10 years back. Now it's completely changing. I mean, it's no longer good to have, but it has become table stakes, right? I mean, I don't essentially bank with any FI. I don't want to bank with any FI who does not have a good and sleek digital experience. I don't really care about moving or traveling to a branch. I don't have time for that. Right? So what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, that's the question that we kind of ask ourselves repeatedly, right? It's so, I think what it's really come down to is a few different components. Our members, they expect an effortless experience, right? So minimal amount of clicks to get the job done, right? And that's regardless of which platform, right? You need that consistency across platforms, whether it be, account opening, your online banking, your contact for support, applying for a loan, anything. It just has to be a consistent experience, right? It also has to be personalized, right? We have a lot of data, banking data on our members. And so, we have the ability to really personalize that experience regardless of what digital channel they're using. And then lastly, I think because we're a highly regulated, industry, it really comes down to trust and security. Really have to have that component. And I'm a member at Provident, so this is important to me. We have that constant feedback loop with the staff that interface with members. We're constantly doing a competitive analysis to see what the big banks are doing, not just other credit unions. And
Sure.
we try to keep parity with whatever fits our business model, right? And so, I think in terms of what's changed and how it's changed a lot. Everybody wants to obviously do everything on their phone now. So that's, it's not new, but it continues to trend in that direction. But the biggest thing I think is is AI, obviously. That's really changed a lot, not just for us, but also what members expect, right? So, historically, I think our members, they were expecting more of a reactive experience, and now we have to be really proactive. And with AI, we have the ability to do that. So like, for example, in digital banking, it's not like, a message that says you're going to overdraft in 3 days. You have to tell them, hey, would you like to move money now because, X is going to happen, right? And so that's a big change that we're trying to constantly keep up with.
Sure. That's an interesting way of looking at it, for sure. Let's talk about your experience at Provident, right? So what does a great day at work looks like for you at Provident?
Okay, well, I can answer that a couple different ways, really. So from an executive standpoint, a great day for me is getting confirmation that our KPIs, that we're hitting our KPIs on a newly deployed project. Nothing really feels better, honestly, than knowing that we're improving a system or that we're eliminating a material hours of manual processing, right? So that's always a great day. But I think from the old software developer in me, a great day is when the software development team asks me to join their Scrum meetings, right, and participate in design discussions, bounce questions off each other. That's really still gets me excited.
Yep, interesting. Next question is about balance, Eric, right? So I usually ask the balance question a lot. So how do you balance innovation in digital channels with reliability and I would say uptime expectations in core banking? Because both of them are very important, the balance of both of them.
Right. Yeah, no, that's true. Well, I think for us, it's not an innovation versus reliability conversation. I think it's more of innovating around our core banking application, right? While really protecting it. The core system, it's in the name, right? It's the core to our business, right? And that's really the system of record. So it's just really having that mindset, that collective mindset that the stability of the core it's non-negotiable. And so, if you go from there, innovation is obviously really important, right? You need it to be competitive. So, we really try to keep that close relationship with our core banking provider, not necessarily steer too far away from some of their certified business partners and their strategic partners. So that's one area where, so we really focus on that. And then also, from an internal development standpoint, right, we really do try to innovate a lot. And so it's giving access to that data without impacting core operations. So, for us, that's really the key.
Understand. Yeah, that's a well way. Next, I want to talk about fintech partnerships, right? So, Eric, this was a question which we had long back, whether we should partner with fintechs or not. Now I think it's no longer a question, but as it's like basics you need to, otherwise you get extinct, right? For the lack of a better word. So fintech partnership is like normal now. So both fintech partnership and transformation is changing the way how credit unions operate. Earlier, building something versus buying much quicker, faster, more efficient. So how do you decide which innovations do you actually plan to invest in, right? So there are like 200 different innovations that you can plan for, from origination till servicing. But how do you take your bets?
Yeah, right. We can't no longer ignore the fintechs. They offer, there's some that offer some really valuable solutions. And so, for us, we still ask ourselves that question, build versus buy. And, it typically just depends on, the complexity of what it is, right? And so a lot of the times we try to focus on the areas that are going to add the most value, so we talk about, fraud detection and prevention solutions. Every dollar that we save from fraud is a dollar to the bottom line. So when we're looking at, partnering with fintechs, it's really for use cases like that. And so also fintechs that can kind of automate mundane and repetitive tasks, reducing the cost of doing revenue, those are also particularly important to us. And then we also choose by their level of maturity. Businesses or vendors that, they're still, they're trying to go public or private or whatever, but they have a small customer base, and, we don't necessarily feel comfortable doing business with them.
But again, to your point, I mean, you have to give opportunity to fintechs who are even starting up. Otherwise, how will innovation happen?
Yeah, that's absolutely. Everybody had to start somewhere, right?
Exactly, right. So that's also very important. Yep, that's interesting. In terms of risk, right? Because with the amount of new or innovative type of attacks that are coming on, cybersecurity risk is one of the most important risks. Be it for a bank, be it for a retailer, be it for healthcare, like anywhere. That's the most important thing right now. So my question is, what are the top security or cyber risks you're planning to address right now, or at least is on the hopper right now?
Yeah, and I'm not trying to be disingenuous when I answer this question, but it's all of them. Right. There's, any risk can pose a reputational problem and impact our members. Obviously there's the big ones like, ransomware. We do extreme planning around ransomware. Our security team really is an expert in security, and we have tools for not just north-south traffic, but also east-west, to make sure that the proliferation of malware or ransomware can't really spread. I think the other one really that we've had to just focus on recently is AI. I think AI is expanding at a rate much faster than security can keep up. So, we've really taken a security first posture when it comes to deploy AI solutions, right? And so we're really looking at solutions that are monitoring our employee browser traffic, protecting our internal data, monitoring prompts to make sure that no confidential or PII data is leaving the organization. So, that's a big focus and a big lift for our security team right now.
Yeah. So, but if you were to pick up maybe one or two of them, what would they be?
I would say, if it's one or two, it's definitely, threat actors that are using AI to try to cyber attack, and then ransomware. Those are the obviously the two biggest ones.
The most important ones, right? Yeah.
Everybody is focusing on.
100% agree. Okay. So how do you keep your highly technical teams, right, aligned with the mission-driven outcome? It's not just systems and codes. It's aligning technical prowess with the credit union mission and vision. How do you keep them aligned?
Yeah. That's a good question. And so, I'm lucky to work for an organization that prioritizes members, right?
Sure.
Our focus has always been members and probably always will be. And so it's not, the message that I give my team isn't just coming from me. It's coming from the very top of our organization. And so, we make strategic objectives that are member-centric, and that's the way that we've always been. And so I think that's our main way of doing it. And then, it's just little things too, in meetings, I encourage technical staff, like, hey, when you're troubleshooting this issue, don't just think about it from a technical perspective. Think about it, put yourself in the member's shoes. How would they feel? Right.
Sure. So Eric, one last question in terms of advice, right? So it took some time for you to move to leadership. It takes always time for people to move to leadership. What advice would you give to technologists in credit union who want to reach a leadership role like you?
Advice? Well, I would say, it takes specific skill set to be a leader, right? So a lot of times, people don't enter the workforce having those skills right off the bat. So, they have to be developed and coached. And so for me personally, I took something from every single one of my managers, whether it be good or bad, to develop my own leadership style. But I think one of the most important points would be to, make your intention known. So if you're an employee and you eventually want to transition into leadership, you have to make those intentions be known, right? So that you can get that mentorship. And so your senior management understands that and recognizes that, so they can, hopefully, you can get there.
So Eric, this was, again, great chatting with you, sir, today. We really appreciate the time that you spent with us in this conversation. Thank you again.
Thank you, Anu.